Okay everybody, today I'm going to show you how I make my faux dories or my traveler's notebooks. And if you hear that little clicking in the background, that is my poodle. He obviously needs his nails clipped. Anyway, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure out the size of the leather that we need. And today I will be making a very small, actually it's going to be kind of a wider version of the passport size. It's going to be a little bit chunky. I like to use a rotary cutter to cut my leather, and I use just a regular Carpenter Square to make sure it's square. So I pretty much have all of the sizes memorized, so I kind of just go off the top of my head. And nothing works better than the thumbnail to mark the leather. Leather is very tender, very easy to mark. Just going to go ahead and cut that little piece off. So once we have it cut, I'd like to make sure that it's square. Sorry for the jiggle. I had my camera on the table, and when I realized that it was moving every time I moved, then I went ahead and moved it. So I promise the entire video will not be like this. Okay, so now we're going to trim the corners, and I'm going to try and get a little bit closer for you. There we go. And you just take little cuts. And I confess I learned this from Ray Blake. And you can see here it's not quite perfect, so I'm going to go in and do it again. Unfortunately, off camera. But basically I'm just taking little cuts at a time, and now you can see much better. Hard to get the camera to focus. And then we're going to go ahead and do it again. I'm going to move it back up here so you can see. We're just going to do it again, and we just take little cuts. 1, 2, 3, and it actually ends up like 6 cuts. Even 3 strokes, 6 cuts. So then we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step. You're going to do that to all 4 corners. And the next step is the bevel. So I like to bevel the edges of the leather because it feels nicer in the hand than having a hard, abrupt edge. So basically you just use the tool and you go around. I like to go around the corners, make them nice, and then I go around all 4 sides. So, and that would be Romeo. He wanted to say hello. Okay, and so the next step is going to be to wet the leather so that the leather is all basically one consistency of wet. And the reason why I do this is because I'm going to stamp the leather, and you get a better impression if the leather is wet. And I just use a damp sponge. You can see me reaching off camera. I have a bowl of water over there that I'm dipping my sponge in. And this here is a maker's stamp that I had special made for me. And I'm just going to place it in the back in the corner. And I didn't like that side for the back. I like this side for the back. I tried to put the pretty side of the leather to the front. And one solid smack. And there we go. So you can see that it's Jennifer Harvey, made in USA, handcrafted. Like every step from beginning to end is all done by hand. So next we're going to personalize this with, I believe it's a nickname. And I like to use just a clear quilter's ruler. It's a 6-inch wide ruler, and I measure it so that it is 2/3 of an inch from the edge, and then I use a 15-pound weight to hold it down while I do the tooling. Now here I'm trying to show you there's a little dot in the lower left corner, and as long as that little dot is in the lower left corner, then your letter is going to be the right side up. So I don't know if all stamps have that, but I know mine does, and it's very handy because I once stamped a B upside down, the letter B upside down, and well, it looked really ridiculous. So it's nice to have that. So I went ahead and did all of them. I'm going to show you. I like to leave one letter there in place and then place the next one and just hit it a couple times with the hammer. And by leaving that A there, I had the proper spacing for the M, and I do that with all of them. Next, we're going to dye the leather, and make sure you wear gloves for this because this will stain your hands and it does not come off easily. I still have purple on my hands from 3 days ago. And as you can see, we're using a nice yellow color. And never pour over your leather. You'll end up with spots. Doesn't look good. And I just pour a little bit on the sponge. And then you go in circles. Now, the yellow is very easy to get a nice even color. Not all of the colors are, but the yellow does go very nice. So we're going to do the front and the back. The back takes a lot more dye than the front does because it's more porous. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat. Okay. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. But I like to go top to bottom with it. You can't really do circles because it roughs up the flesh side of the leather too much. But I went ahead and did a second coat on the front to get a nice even yellow color. And then I did the edges because you want to make sure you get the edges as well. So I just do all 4 edges. And touch up the back. And now I'm going to go ahead and punch the holes. The leather's not quite dry yet, but that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and punch the holes. And I line it up, measure it out. In this case, it's going to be 5 inches as the center. And I'm using a hammer punch. Sometimes I will use the plier type punch, but for this I'm just going to use the hammer punch, and I think that is 5/32 of an inch or something. I don't know. It has a weird number on it, but you want to use a punch that's about the same size as the elastic that you're using so that the elastic can go through there. I wouldn't get a punch that's smaller than the elastic because that puts too much strain on the elastic and can even cause it to break. So I'm using one that's about the same size. And I use 2mm elastic. And I'm going to do the traditional vertical elastic. So I'm just doing these 4 holes. And then the way I do the back, I kind of just basically eyeball it. And there we go. There we have our holes. So the next step is to put the elastic in. And if you want more instructions, I did do a video on this. But basically you're going to put the elastic in from the front. And then if you're not going to put in the metal clasp, then you would do it the way I just did it. But if you are, then you want to go ahead and bring that bottom one up, put it through the hole, and then you'll have them both coming through. And then you just want to thread the metal clasp on. And sometimes it goes on easily, sometimes it's kind of a pain, but that's what you want to do. Just get it on there. And then eventually I get it. which had to work it. Sometimes I'll take a piece of wax thread or dental floss and I'll thread it through that way. But now I'm just going to tie a square knot, which is left over right, right over left. And I should have cut it first and then pulled it through, but I didn't, and that's okay. You can still do it this way. And it's off camera, but I'm pulling the elastic through so that the knot sits inside of the clasp. And then I bring my gigantic scissors and we're just gonna cut it. You want to cut it nice and close, and normally if you do it before you pull a bead through, then pull it through the clasp, I'm sorry, then you don't get that little leftover like I did. And then I used the hammer this time and just hit it a couple times with the hammer. And I didn't like the little threads hanging out, which I trying to show you, get the camera to focus, and there it is. So I'm just gonna burn it down. So makes it nice. The elastic's nice and taut. And then the next part is going to be the closure band. So I basically just tie an overhand knot, and then I use a lighter and cinch the edges so that they don't keep coming unraveled. And then I'll take a piece of waxed thread that I have, and I'm going to use that kind of like a needle. And you just put the thread through the loop, and then you put the thread through the hole. And then you're going to pull it through. So, not hard at all. Looks quite nice, this little yellow maroon notebook. So the next step that you actually want to do is burnish the edges, which I would have done this prior to doing the elastic, but I forgot, so I had to do it after. And so basically I'm wetting the edges with water and a sponge, and then I'm using my burnishing tool, and you just rub it pretty firmly across the wet edge. And what that does is it burnishes down the fibers in the leather and makes it nice and smooth, gives it a nice finish. I really prefer a finished edge on the leather, so I do this to all of the Veg Tanned Leather gets this treatment. So I would do that to all of it, and here you can see the difference between the raw edge and the burnished edge. So, and it's still wet. Once it dries, it'll look even better. So now there's nothing left to do but add a couple of notebooks. So I'm going to go ahead and add those in, and I use the one strand as if it were two. So I actually prefer this method for the elastics because it doesn't cause the leather to pucker. Like if you want two bands but you want them to be horizontal or parallel to each other, rather than basically one on top of each other like they are here, the parallel bands will cause the leather to kind of buckle and curve in. But anyway, there it is. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.